The sedan rolls to a stop at the checkpoint. 3 revolutionary guards step forward, their AK-47s slung across their chests, their eyes scanning every detail. It's 2:17 in the morning on a Thursday in Tehran, and the city is locked down. The driver, a man with a Belgian passport and a cover story about import-export contracts, keeps his hands visible on the wheel. In the back seat, wrapped in black cloth and hidden inside a false panel beneath the floor, is a device no larger than a cigarette pack. If the guards find it, everyone in this car dies. The lead guard taps on the window. The driver lowers it slowly, handing over his documents without a word. The guard studies the passport, flips through the pages, and then looks up. His eyes narrow. He says something in Farsi to his partner, who steps around to the rear of the vehicle. The trunk pops open. Footsteps. The sound of luggage being shifted. The driver's pulse is climbing, but his face stays calm. He's been trained for this. He knows that panic is the tell that gets you killed. The second guard closes the trunk and walks back to the front. He leans down, peering through the window at the driver's face, then at the back seat. Empty, clean, nothing unusual. He nods to the lead guard, who hands back the passport and waves them through. The sedan moves forward, through the checkpoint, into the darkness of the city. The driver exhales, but only slightly. The device is still there, still hidden, still operational. And in 6 hours it will be inside the office of one of Iran's most protected diplomats. This is not a story about luck. This is a story about preparation, patience, and the kind of tradecraft that turns an impossible mission into a silent success. How did an Israeli agent end up trapped at that checkpoint, betting everything on one impossible trick? And how did Mossad pull off one of the most sophisticated bugging operations in modern intelligence history without anyone noticing until it was far too late? To understand this operation, you need to understand what was at stake. In the mid-1990s, Iran was accelerating its nuclear program, and the intelligence agencies of the West, primarily Mossad, the CIA, and MI6, were desperate for insight. Public reports gave one picture. Diplomatic statements gave another. But what was actually happening inside the closed meetings of Iranian officials? What were they saying to each other when no cameras were rolling and no Western observers were present? That's where the diplomat comes in. His name has never been publicly confirmed, but he was stationed in a European capital, tasked with managing Iran's diplomatic relationships and, more importantly, coordinating covert procurement efforts for Iran's nuclear and missile programs. He wasn't a scientist, he wasn't a general, but he was a gatekeeper. Every sensitive conversation about suppliers, shipping routes, front companies, and financial networks passed through his office. If Mossad could hear what he was hearing, they could map the entire supply chain. The problem was access. The diplomat's office was inside a secure embassy building. It had armed guards, surveillance cameras, controlled entry points, and counterintelligence protocols designed specifically to catch this kind of penetration. Iranian security officials knew that Western intelligence services would try to bug their facilities. They swept for devices regularly. They rotated staff. They compartmentalized information. Getting inside wasn't just difficult, it was a multi-layered operational problem that required not one breakthrough, but several. Mossad began planning the operation months in advance. They didn't go in blind. They studied the building's layout, the security routines, the staff schedules, and the personal habits of everyone who worked there. They identified weaknesses not in the technology, but in the human systems. Who had access? Who could be influenced? Who made mistakes? Every intelligence operation starts with the question, what's the path of least resistance? And in this case, the answer was the front door. It was someone who walked through it every day without suspicion. Mossad's approach was methodical. They didn't rush. They built the operation in layers, each one designed to create plausible deniability and reduce the risk of exposure. The first layer was reconnaissance. Agents, posing as businessmen, tourists, and contractors, spent weeks in the area around the embassy, mapping the routines. When did the security shifts change? When did the cleaning staff arrive? When were the offices least occupied? These weren't random observations, they were the foundation of the entire plan. The second layer was asset cultivation. Mossad needed someone on the inside, but not a spy in the traditional sense. They needed someone who had legitimate access to the building and could move freely without raising suspicion. The target was a maintenance contractor, a local man who had been servicing the embassy's electrical and HVAC systems for years. He wasn't political. He was ideological. He was just a technician trying to make a living, and that made him vulnerable. The approach was slow and indirect. A Mossad case officer, operating under European business cover, struck up a conversation with the contractor at a cafe. They talked about work, about money, about the rising cost of living. Over several weeks, the relationship deepened. The contractor never knew he was being recruited. He thought he was just talking to a friendly businessman who occasionally paid him for small favors, information about the building's layout, the locations of electrical panels, the timing of maintenance visits. By the time the contractor realized he was involved in something more serious, he was already in too deep to walk away. The third layer was the device itself. Mossad's technical team designed a listening device that could evade the embassy's regular counterintelligence sweeps. It was powered by the building's own electrical system, which meant it didn't need a battery that could die or emit detectable heat signatures. It transmitted in short, irregular bursts, using frequencies that mimicked ambient electronic noise. And it was small enough to be hidden inside a wall socket or behind a light fixture without leaving any visible trace. But the real innovation wasn't the device. It was the delivery method. Mossad knew that bringing the device into the building was the highest risk moment of the entire operation. Any anomaly, an unexpected visitor, a suspicious package, a deviation from routine could trigger a security lockdown. So they didn't bring it in as an external object. They hid it inside a replacement part that the contractor was already scheduled to install during a routine maintenance visit. The device was embedded inside a standard electrical component, indistinguishable from the original unless someone disassembled it completely and knew exactly what to look for. The plan was elegant, but reality is never clean. As the operation moved closer to execution, complications began to pile up. The first problem was timing. The contractor's maintenance schedule was suddenly changed due to a minor issue with the embassy's air conditioning system. The visit that was supposed to happen on a Tuesday was pushed to Friday, which meant the operational window shifted by 3 days. That might not sound significant, but in covert operations, timing is everything. The team had to recalibrate their surveillance, their communications protocols, and their contingency plans. The second problem was surveillance. Iranian counterintelligence had become more aggressive in the weeks leading up to the operation. They were conducting random vehicle checks near the embassy, monitoring known foreign intelligence operatives, and quietly interrogating embassy staff about unusual behavior or contacts. Mossad's case officer, the one managing the contractor, was being watched. Not actively, no one suspected him yet, but his movements were logged, and any repeated pattern could trigger a deeper investigation. The third problem was the contractor himself. He was starting to crack under the pressure. During one meeting with the case officer, he asked direct questions. What exactly was being installed? Who was listening? What would happen to him if he got caught? The case officer had to reassure him without revealing the full scope of the operation. He couldn't say too much, because if the contractor panicked and went to Iranian security, the entire mission would collapse. But he also couldn't say too little, because if the contractor felt abandoned, he might back out at the last moment. Mossad's solution was psychological leverage. They reminded the contractor that he had already taken money, already provided information, and already crossed a line that Iranian authorities would consider treasonous. Walking away now wouldn't save him, it would only leave him exposed without protection. The case officer framed the final step not as a betrayal, but as the safest path forward. Get in, install the part, get out, and disappear into the normal routine. No one would ever know. On the morning of the installation, the contractor drove to the embassy as scheduled. He carried his toolbox, his work order, and the replacement part with the hidden device inside. He passed through the security checkpoint without incident. The guards knew him. They had seen him dozens of times. He was just another technician doing routine maintenance. Inside the building, he moved through the hallways with practiced ease. He knew where the Diplomat's office was located. He knew which electrical panel controlled that section of the building. And he knew that he had exactly 45 minutes before someone would notice if he stayed too long. The diplomat's office was empty when the contractor arrived. That was expected. The diplomat was in a meeting on another floor, and his assistant had stepped out for lunch. The contractor propped open the door, set down his toolbox, and began working on the electrical panel. To anyone watching, it looked like routine maintenance. He unscrewed the cover, checked the wiring, and replaced the component as planned. The device slipped into place without any visible alteration. He closed the panel, tested the lights to make sure everything was functioning normally, and packed up his tools. But then, something went wrong. The diplomat's assistant returned early. She stepped into the office, saw the contractor, and asked what he was doing. He explained a scheduled maintenance visit, nothing unusual. She checked her calendar. There was no maintenance appointment listed for that day. The contractor's heart rate spiked, but he stayed calm. He showed her the work order, which had been forged by Mossad's technical team to match the embassy's internal documentation format. She studied it for a moment, then nodded and walked away. The contractor finished his work, closed the toolbox, and left the building. The device was active within hours. It began transmitting in short bursts, sending encrypted audio back to a receiving station operated by Mossad in a nearby city. The intelligence haul was immediate and significant. The diplomat's office became a goldmine of information conversations about procurement networks, discussions with Iranian officials about nuclear program timelines, and details about covert shipments moving through European ports. Mossad didn't just hear what the diplomat was saying. They heard who he was talking to, what his priorities were, and where the vulnerabilities in Iran's supply chain existed. The operation continued for months without detection. Iranian counterintelligence conducted regular sweeps of the embassy, but the device remained hidden. Its design made it nearly impossible to detect using standard equipment. It didn't emit a constant signal. It didn't generate heat. It didn't drain power in a way that could be traced. And because it was embedded inside a legitimate electrical component, even a physical inspection wouldn't reveal anything unusual unless someone knew exactly what to look for and disassembled the part completely. But Mossad knew the clock was ticking. No operation lasts forever. Eventually, someone would notice an anomaly, a pattern in the electromagnetic spectrum, an inconsistency in the building's power consumption, or a casual comment from the contractor that didn't match the official records. The longer the device stayed active, the higher the risk of exposure. So, Mossad extracted as much intelligence as possible, as quickly as possible, knowing that the operation had a finite lifespan. The end came not from a technical failure, but from a human one. The contractor, who had been living under constant stress, made a mistake. He mentioned the embassy job to a friend, who mentioned it to someone else, who eventually brought it to the attention of Iranian security officials. The investigation was quiet at first, just routine questions, just a review of maintenance records. But once the investigators started digging, they found inconsistencies. The work order didn't match the official schedule. The contractor's timeline didn't add up. And when they brought him in for questioning, he broke. He confessed everything: the meetings with the foreign businessman, the payments, the installation of the component. Iranian security teams swept the diplomat's office again, this time with specialized equipment, and they found the device. By that point, it had been transmitting for nearly 8 months. The intelligence damage was already done. The immediate fallout was severe. The contractor disappeared, arrested, interrogated, and likely executed, though Iran never publicly confirmed his fate. The diplomat was reassigned. The embassy underwent a full security overhaul. Iranian counterintelligence began a broader investigation into whether other facilities had been compromised in similar ways, and Mossad quietly closed the operation, knowing that the intelligence they had gathered would shape their understanding of Iran's nuclear program for years to come. But the long-term impact went beyond intelligence collection. This operation became a case study in modern espionage, proof that even the most secure facilities can be penetrated if you understand the human vulnerabilities. It showed that technology alone isn't enough to protect sensitive information. You also need to protect the people who have access to it and the systems they rely on to do their jobs. Iran learned that lesson the hard way. The operation also raised uncomfortable ethical questions that still linger today. The contractor was to spy. He wasn't ideologically opposed to Iran. He was a civilian who got pulled into an intelligence operation because he was vulnerable and accessible. Mossad used financial pressure, psychological manipulation, and the threat of exposure to turn him into an asset. When the operation was over, he paid the ultimate price. Did he deserve that? Was his life an acceptable cost for the intelligence that was gained? Mossad would argue yes, that the information saved lives, prevented nuclear proliferation, and gave Israel a strategic advantage. But the contractor's family would tell a different story. This is the reality of covert operations. They don't happen in a vacuum. They involve real people making real choices under impossible pressure. The diplomat went to work every day, unaware that his conversations were being recorded. The contractor thought he was just doing a favor for a friendly businessman. The case officer built a relationship based on deception, and the analysts back in Tel Aviv listened to the recordings, knowing that the operation could collapse at any moment and that people would die if it did. There's also the question of sovereignty. The embassy was Iranian territory, protected under international law. Mossad violated that sovereignty, not with a military strike but with a covert penetration that went undetected for months. Some would argue that this was justified, that Iran's nuclear program posed an existential threat to Israel, and that intelligence gathering was a legitimate defensive measure. Others would argue that it was an act of espionage that violated diplomatic norms and set a dangerous precedent. If Mossad can bug an Iranian embassy, what stops other intelligence agencies from doing the same to Israeli facilities? Where do you draw the line between national security and international law? These aren't easy questions, and there are no simple answers. But they're worth thinking about because they reveal the moral complexity of intelligence work. Every operation involves trade-offs. Every success comes with a cost, and every decision made in the shadows has consequences that ripple outward, often in ways that the operatives themselves can't predict or control. The Tehran embassy bug is a reminder that espionage isn't about heroes and villains. It's about competing interests, calculated risks, and the willingness to operate in the gray areas where laws bend and lives hang in the balance. Mossad succeeded because they understood that penetrating a secure facility is just a technical challenge, it's a human one. They found the weakness, exploited it, and extracted the intelligence they needed. But they also left behind a trail of wreckage, a man who was used and discarded, a diplomat whose career was destroyed, and a counterintelligence system that had to be rebuilt from the ground up. If you were in that contractor's position, knowing what you know now, would you have made the same choice? And if you were the case officer sitting across from him in that cafe, would you have felt justified in what you were doing? At what point does the mission become more important than the people caught in its path? If this operation opened your eyes to how real spy work actually operates in the shadows, subscribe to Hidden Ops for more true missions from the world of covert intelligence.